What's up, Goon Squad? Last week, we hit you up with the big picture outlook for the AFC. And because we somehow all managed to survive that, we can now get down to business on the better half of professional football, also known as the NFC. Look, all kidding aside, make sure that you go back and listen to that edition of the podcast as well, so you get the full breakdown on what teams need to do and either to get back to the playoffs or remain there from last year. This is a two-part series, so you're going to get the NFC this week. Make sure you go back and check out the AFC if you missed it. I promise we did a good enough job to cover up for the fact that we had to talk about the AFC. The Combine is literally right around the corner, so be sure to keep it locked in here because we're giving you the best offseason coverage. Everybody else mailed it in for the offseason already. You'll see them again in August at some point, but we're just grinding all offseason long and giving you the best coverage without any planned breaks along the way here. Before we get into the NFC talk, we like to kick it off with kind of an icebreaker conversation thing every week. So here's one that I was thinking about a lot today, and I need some insight from the goons. When your kids want to play and play a game or something like that, what is the absolute least favorite thing that you have to play with your kid?
I have
You're
one
just
little
start
girl.
out making us look like bad people here, huh?
Yeah.
Well,
I have one little girl. I'll play board games all day long. I'll play, any type of game. I can't stand this whole playing with doll stuff. I was not built for this. I was not built to brush Barbie's hair. It is not something that I was supposed to do with my life.
Now I'll ask as a concerned father, you're ahead of me by about 2 years with my daughter. What is your stance on tea parties?
Tea parties is fine.
You're on board with the tea party.
I can pretend. You know why? Because I can pretend that it doesn't have to be tea. If we're just pretending, then mine's like a gin and tonic or something.
It's a little rum and Dr. Pepper, and we're having a blast.
Exactly.
Hey, gin and tonic. You still go pinky out or no?
Oh, absolutely.
I figured so.
She's got to believe it's tea.
You got to sell it to her, right?
You're still gonna sell it to her. See, I'm hopeful because I'll relate myself to you. I'm not gonna be Mr. Comb the Barbie dad. I mean, I will. If that's what she needs, you know what I mean? I'll jump on the grenade, but it's certainly also not how I'm built. Mm-hmm. I'm hopeful that my 5-year-old son, she wants to do what he wants to do all the time right now. I'm hoping that, but it sounds awful. I'm basically saying I hope my daughter doesn't have her own wants and needs and personality. That's basically what I'm saying here. I hope she just wants to play football and basketball all the time like he does. He's getting addicted
or play with dinosaurs.
Right. Well, no, dinosaur time is kind of over. He's into Madden now.
Oh,
every day I come home and he's like, Dad, I was the Cardinals today. So I put it on rookie and all he has to do is basically run forward and the running back breaks every tackle there is. So, but I don't know. I think for me, it's more when you have the long day at work and as a father, you're basically their biggest toy.
Yep.
So when it's just wrestle jungle gym time, there's a time for that. And it's not after dad just got home from working his second job.
Yeah.
But you can't tell them that. They don't get it. So you got to do it. And your heart's just not there. I guess that's my issue.
Yeah.
My worst game, and it's not even so much the game because I made it up. This is a goofy game we play where I lay on the bed and they run around the bed. It's called crocodile or alligator, either one. And then I just try to get them as they run by. I don't mind the game. The part I mind is my 7-year-old just will constantly make up new rules to the game. All right, we're gonna run by and you try to get us, but you can't touch us. I'm like, that's not a game. This is not something. So the constant addition of rules that aren't rules. I'm like, I made up this dang game. I make the rules. I'm the rule maker here.
I think every child making up rules as they go along has to be everybody's least favorite thing.
It's awful.
I got to preface before I say anything, though. I will say that from experience, I've seen everyone here, for as much as we may not like something, we're 100% gung-ho for it. Rocco comes to my house and is on my floor before he even says hello to me, playing with my kids. So Like that's just how we're kind of built. But the worst is hair salon. And I don't know if you guys get this because I have such a great head of hair.
Nobody tried to play hair salon with me, South.
There are 6 days a week where I don't care if she wants to play hair salon. She always wants to do it when I'm going on a worldwide televised podcast and put all kinds of bows and colors and sprinkles and stuff in my hair. And it's hard because, basically you have to sit there and take one for the team while she's yanking the hairs out of your head. But that's definitely my worst. And that's what kind of triggered this whole conversation tonight.
I'm going to add this one too. And if you guys haven't been there, consider yourselves lucky, and I hope you never have to go there. I'm done with the floor is lava phase. I don't know if you guys have had that at all.
I love the floor is lava.
No, see, because like I walk in the house and I got my bag on from work still, my jacket's still on. I just took my boots off, and she's like, "Daddy, the floor is lava," and I'm like, I'm not jumping in the air right now. This is not happening.
So then you go ahead and jump in the air. I got a real quick story before we jump in. A couple weeks ago, we were at Bob Evans out with friends that also have children, and we're walking through the restaurant, and all of a sudden Mercy says, "Daddy, the floor is lava." And all of us jumped up on chairs. In the middle of Bob Evans. My whole family, their whole family, up on chairs, Bob Evans.
I'd expect nothing less.
Floor is lava. I gotta get up there.
I'm not trying to lose my feet.
No.
All right, listen, let's take a look at the playoff teams from this past season in the NFC and decide what we think they need to do in order to get themselves back into the playoffs and maybe make a run at a Super Bowl in 2018. Let's start with the teams who were bounced the earliest here, and we'll start right off with the Los Angeles Rams. I think most people are feeling pretty confident that the Rams are on an upswing, but is this a case where this is a team that maybe, kind of overachieved and jumped to a next level that we weren't expecting a little quicker than we thought they might, and now our expectations are a little too high?
Well, yeah, go ahead, Moss.
I don't think they're too high. I mean, I'm not going to be too long here, but I think we saw what Sean McVay is, and however you feel about him winning Coach of the Year is what it is, but he's an excellent coach, and he got the best out of this young, skilled offense that he could. And when I say he got the best out of them he could, I don't mean to say they overachieved. I mean, he got them to what they are maybe earlier than we all predicted, but I mean, you can feel how you feel. I'm not going to fault anybody for their personal opinions, but there is absolutely no basis behind thinking that Jared Goff and Todd Gurley, and even to a lesser extent Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, like, why is that not what they are? Why are they not going to contend for the next 6, 7, 8 years as the number one scoring offense in the league? And they have some work to do maybe on defense. This Marcus Peters trade is certainly helpful to a team that's got a couple of major secondary pieces as free agents, but no, the Rams, they're the real deal. I don't think our expectations are too high. I think they're the real deal.
Yeah, I'm definitely sold on the Rams. I was pretty high on them in the offseason. I thought that Todd was going to have a great season. I thought that Goff was going to really start to accelerate. And also the thing that I'm excited about for them, they have a second youngest team in the league, only behind the Browns, and they don't count because they just have 7 first-round picks, so they basically bring in like 19 and 20-year-olds every year, so that doesn't count. And last year, the Rams' average age was 25.09, which was high and above number 2 in the league. And so they're still going to gel even more. I was also going to add what you said about Marcus Peters. That's the obvious one, but that offense is still really putting the pieces together. Like, they're not on all cylinders yet. It's scary to think about what they possibly could be.
Yeah, this will be year 2 under Wade Phillips. So I'm interested to see, last year, I feel like at times the defense was a liability for them. And even at that, that's kind of stretching it. They played pretty well. Yeah. There were games where, they kind of got into a little bit of a horse race where obviously you don't want to do that, but they're going to lose potentially Tremaine Johnson, maybe LaMarcus Joyner, and then, Connor Barr went at outside linebacker. I'm not sure how huge that is at this point, but those are 3 guys who were pretty much starting and making having a big impact on that defense. So You do have some holes to fill. You did a nice job getting Marcus Peters when it seems like pretty much everybody else is out on him. I think it's the right coach to kind of rein him in. I think Wade Phillips had a lot of success doing that with Talib a couple years ago when he was perceived as a troublemaker. So what I'm really most interested in with them is on offense. I know Sammy Watkins really wasn't like a world beater for them, but how do you replace him if he walks? Just the threat of Sammy Watkins. I know we're not.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like Sammy Watkins. This is a side tangent. Sammy Watkins has got to be the only top 5 pick bust in history that everyone feels sorry for. Like, you just can't play. At some point, you just can't play. I know he has injury issues. I get it. But when he's out there,
that's part of the problem.
Dude, he's not a difference maker when he's out there. Yeah. Like, you're way better off with Kenny Stills or Ted Ginn or Deshaun Jackson, like any of those other field stretchers, than trying to force the ball to Sammy Watkins. I'm sorry. Sammy Watkins is apparently a hotspot issue for me. Yeah, I never really realized it till right now. But how are you going to replace him?
Well, I'm not necessarily worried about the physical player, but I mean, just what defenses have to do for the fact that he's out on the field. Like, I don't think anybody's necessarily scared lining up across from Robert Woods. Maybe they should be.
I think they should be at least just as scared,
but more scared.
You know, you don't have a real superstar threat at the tight end position. You know, Cooper Kupp is really still developing for as good as he is. So that's a lot of pressure, I guess, is my point, to kind of not have another guy there, another guy who's at least a perceived threat on the outside. So it's less about the name on the jersey and more about the perceived threat to me, because you did see at times when Watkins was in, it did open things up for some other guys there.
Doesn't Tavon Austin run like a 4.3? Like, I think he's just as much a difference maker.
Yeah, but he's a free agent too, so he's gonna be out the door. So I stayed kind of quiet here. I actually kind of not differ in opinion. Like, I definitely think they overachieved this year, mainly because I don't think any of us expected them to be where they are right now. I think we still thought they're probably another year away from what they just did. I'm curious to see McVay in year 2. Once guys really start scheming for what they look like now. You know what I mean? It's one thing to say, you know, they can be the top offense in the league for the next 10 years. It's another to actually see it, you know, put into action, if you will. What does Jared Goff look like if they take away the run game and stack the box? You know what I mean? And Todd Gurley is not the dominant force that he was this past year. Because let's be honest, as good as Goff was, he was able to be so because Todd Gurley was otherworldly fantastic this year.
I think they helped each other, though.
Yeah, it helped each other to some degree, but
I mean, Todd wasn't very good 2 years ago.
Well, yeah, because they had no line and no quarterback. So I understand that the quarterback obviously helps that, but so does beefing up the offensive line. But then what happens to Goff in terms of his progression as he's continuing in the league when he stops seeing true defenses and starts seeing, you know, stacking of the boxes to make sure that Gurley doesn't beat them?
He has open receivers.
I mean? Yeah, I hope so.
I mean, how does it?
Yeah, I get your concern, but I think it's misplaced with Goff. Like, he had the Jeff Fisher stink on him, but all the way through college, this guy was the number 1 pick, and then he was the number 1 pick, and the only thing that can blow that is Jeff Fisher, just like the only thing that can ruin DeAndre Hopkins is Brock Osweiler. Like, I think if teams stack to take away Todd Gurley,
he's going to shred them.
You got an MVP candidate in Goff.
I mean, I agree.
Well, I guess my point is just like we haven't seen that yet. So
it's a valid concern.
Are you gonna put you know all your chickens in that basket without having seen it?
I am, though.
Yeah,
I think it's a valid concern, but I'm willing to put my chickens and all my eggs in that basket.
Yeah, I'm just going with the eggs. I'm not putting the actual chickens in there.
Yeah, they're gonna become chickens, though.
I'm not.
That guy's everything he touches magic.
I'm not, just because this conference is so stacked. You know what I mean? So, like,
they just did pretty well in it, though.
Well, They went 10-6, and
11-5.
11-5, and lost in the first round of the playoffs. I think they're one of the best 6 or 7 teams in the NFC. I'm not saying they're not, but I don't know if they're top 3.
All right. Well, we'll move on from this because I think we can go on this for a long time. But just as a side note, it's really odd to see Jared Goff all of a sudden in these like NFL commercials and having so much personality from where he was, like when he was drafted. He had to know that the Jeff Fisher stink was coming on strong.
Yeah.
That's the only explanation, because all of a sudden he's like a different guy.
Yeah.
So it's amazing to see.
I'm so glad he's not Jay Cutler.
Yes.
Because he was Jay Cutler.
All right, let's talk about the Carolina Panthers. Their biggest need is probably, a weapon or two on offense and to strengthen themselves on the lines of scrimmage from what we saw last year. Are the other NFC South teams just too much for where they're heading right now? Or can the Panthers be back in as a playoff team next year?
I think you can be back in because you have Cam. I mean,
depending on what Cam shows up.
But even like, okay, so we said preseason last year, he was obviously one of the 10 best players of all time in 2015, single season players.
Yeah.
And then 2016 crashed back down to earth. But, I see your point here, South, on the agenda.
I think they're going to come. I think they're going to be back, and I think they're playing good football. Sorry, we lost Miles there. Hopefully, we can get him back in. But yeah, they're playing great football. I think they kind of outperformed what most people thought they were going to do, along with, I guess, a lot of the teams in that division that aren't the Buccaneers. We had higher hopes for them, but yeah, they're putting the pieces together a little bit on defense with not a lot. So get a couple more pieces there. Their offense, as long as it keeps working, they got a lot of big playmakers, and as long as Cam plays well, I mean, that's really the sticking point for me. If Cam shows up, if he has that, almost no rushing, has 15 yards a game rushing and doesn't really make any difference, then I think they're going to crash again. But if Cam comes out, they let him have that 500 to 700 yards rushing, and he's always that constant threat. Funchess is still coming along. Their receivers are getting better. I guess they're going to keep that double-headed attack at the running game. It worked well. McCaffrey, I think, is better than we saw, and he's going to continue to get better. So, yeah, I'm still afraid of Panthers for sure.
You guys got me back yet?
Yeah, you're there now.
Yeah.
Hey, all right. I don't know. I have any idea what happened. Ultimately, my point was that 2015 Cam, it's not like they were a skilled position team then. You had Ted Ginn. Right. Funchess wasn't Funchess. Kelvin Benjamin was out that year. Christian McCaffrey's the best skill player he's ever played with.
Right.
So I think ultimately when you say the weapons are weak, Cam's always kind of made his weapons better because everyone's so scared he's going to run for 160 yards on you. So I think the lines of scrimmage is where you kind of nailed it. They're in a tough division, but they get that fixed up, they're in all right shape.
They're in a tough division and the far tougher conference. If the Carolina Panthers were in the AFC, they'd be the second best team in the AFC. Unfortunately, they're not. And honestly, I don't think they're a top 3 team. I don't think there's a whole lot they can do this offseason to make them a top 3 team in the NFC. That's just the way it is. Unless Cam comes back with like a 2015 Cam, you need him to be that.
But then they're the best team in the NFL.
Okay, but like if he's not that, then they're they're a playoff team, but a marginal playoff team, a playoff team that can't get past.
They might not be
a playoff team that can't get past any other playoff team.
And right. I think that your original point is the issue is that if he's not that guy, are they good enough in the NFC South?
Probably not.
Which already sent 3 teams to the playoffs this year, and as Deal said, the Bucks were maybe the most disappointing team in the league, which means they do have the talent to go 10-6, 11-5 next year if they put it together.
Yep.
Yeah. Let me throw this out there just because as a final thought, because I think you guys hit on a lot of what I wanted to say with the Panthers. Putting my Michigan bias aside and being honest with that, can Devin Funchess be a legitimate number one if he can get himself to a point where he's not just like constantly banged up?
No.
I think he can.
I think he can. I don't think he's going to be like a top 5 receiver in the league, but I think he can be a legitimate threat to be a number one, especially with Cam. I'll preface by saying that with Cam as the quarterback.
I'll say especially with the Panthers when
right,
legitimately your number one is Greg Olsen.
Right.
And I guess I'll say he can be the best receiver on that roster because they have Greg Olsen and Christian McCaffrey. But I think you need a better number two. But if you can bring in a decent two, I hear what you're saying, Rock. I don't think Can he be your primary target? No.
That drives me nuts because that's what a number one. That's what a number one receiver is.
Not when
he
you
is not.
Well,
you're thinking with like a fantasy football brain. Why does the number one receiver have to be a wide receiver? Like it doesn't.
Yeah,
it doesn't, but like it doesn't. But like,
if
you're asking if Devin, if you're asking, the question can Devin Funchess be the best wide receiver on this team? It was, can Devin Funchess be a number one wide receiver? The answer is no, he cannot. Right? Like
it's
a number one wide receiver.
He's not a number one wide receiver in fantasy. He's not a number one wide receiver in real life.
Yes,
he's not. No,
he is.
Not.
We're not asking if he's a top 12. That's not what we're asking.
No, I'm asking, can he be the number one wide receiver on the team? And I think absolutely.
Right.
If you're one of the very, very rare teams, aka the Chiefs, the Patriots, the Eagles, or the Panthers, that have that elite tight end, the elite tight end,
right?
Then yes, absolutely, he can be your best outside player. But you're thinking of okay, can he be the number one pass catcher? No. I don't think he can.
That's a different question.
But if you have that elite tight end target, absolutely he can be your best wide receiver.
So if by number one receiver you mean the third best receiving option on the team, okay, then maybe That's not what I think of. That's not what I think of when I think of a number one wide receiver.
There's a middle ground between what you're thinking and what we're saying. Like,
right.
Can he be the third best target on like the Giants with Evan Ingram? Well, okay, the Giants are a bad option because but random team A. Like, can he be the third best player on the Bears? Of course not. Like, and if he's on the Bears, he is their best receiving option, and that's a problem for me. But the fact is, he's on a rare team that you can be the best receiver, and that's still fine because you're not the primary target. Even the way the Panthers run their offense, it's not all about going to the wide receiver. It never has been.
Rocco, here's the question then. What do you need to see out of him for him to be I have a follow-up question, but what do you need to see out of him for you to be considering him the number one wide receiver or a number one wide receiver?
Well, for starters, when you think of the term number one wide receiver, like, and maybe this is just the way I'm looking at the term, like you can't be the third highest volume targeted guy in your offense. That's not a number one wide receiver. And I don't even mean top 12. I just mean like he's just at that point, he's just a guy catching passes. I love him in the red zone. I think his height weight ratio is a mismatch for anybody. And I love that ability for him, but he's not stretching a field because he's not that fast. He's doesn't get decent enough separation over the middle to like really make a difference there. So really it comes down to he's a monster inside the 25, and that's what he is.
So here's our point. In 2015, you agree that Cam had one of the greatest seasons we've ever seen, right?
Yeah, of course.
Ted Ginn was his number one wide receiver with 44 catches and 739 yards. So we don't need 1,500 yards out of a guy when he's playing on this team.
Okay, so back in 2015, when you would have said the statement, is Ted Ginn a number one wide receiver? The answer is still no.
After the season?
Well, yeah, after the season.
Yes, he was good enough to be the number one wide receiver on that team.
All right, we're going to move on. No, I would love to stay here. I would
love to stay here too.
To mini wrap it up, like we can have a conversation about this later in the offseason about what some of these terms should really mean.
Yeah.
Like, what is a number one wide receiver? It doesn't have to be Antonio Brown in my mind.
No, I know it's not Antonio Brown, but there's also got to be like some terminology here for someone who's the number one wide receiver on their team. Yeah, he's wide receiver one on their depth chart. The Jets have 4 guys on their depth chart too at wide receiver. I wouldn't put any of them as the number one wide receiver.
Well, none of them have 8 touchdowns.
That's because you don't have Greg Olsen.
I think you're and Christian McCaffrey.
Right.
It's just maybe it's just the way they run their offense. Maybe it's just the terminology or what we're looking at here. Like
that's actually exactly what we were saying.
The term number one wide receiver to me is a guy I trust to lead my receiving core, and he's not that.
Oh, there's like 5 of those in the league for me then. So I think that's
only 5.
All right, let's move on. Let's move on because we're going to get back to this.
Scott's having a panic attack about the clock.
Listen, I would stay here all day because I think it's good conversation, but we're going to have this conversation, when we get into positional stuff. So, you'll have to come back for.
We're going to argue a ton over it. Devin Funchess is this year's Devontae Adams. Let's go. Mark it down. I'll say it right now.
And I will make you be right again. I mean, the guy had 8 touchdowns this year. Atlanta Falcons. Their young defense has come together pretty nicely, and the weapons are certainly there for the Falcons. So what exactly is it that's preventing them from taking that step and winning a championship?
Coaching is holding them back, or at least offensive play calling.
Yeah,
Julio Jones is far too good at football and life to have 88 catches and 3 touchdowns. That's just common sense, and nobody in Atlanta seems to be able to figure that out.
I did Julio Jones at Words with Friends one time.
He should have at least 120 catches every single year.
Yeah.
Every year. I don't care about establishing the run. You can do that and still get him 120 catches, i.e. Antonio Brown and Lev Bell. Why does it work for them? Why do other teams with their situation figure out a way to get it done, but that offense can't? It's alarming.
I got to tell you, like, as much as at least I don't know how much I've done it on podcast here, but privately I'm crushing Julio lately because of the numbers and all that, and not so much him, but his role as a fantasy player. For me, first off, I think the demise of the Falcons is wildly overrated. You're talking about a team that went to the Super Bowl and had it won last year. And then this year, they lost 4 of 5 at one point and still finished 10-6. Like,
right.
They're a great team. And they ended up having to go on the road. They beat the Rams that we just drooled over a little bit. And then they had to go on the road to a team that nobody beat for the entire playoffs. So call it what you want. I still think Atlanta is absolutely terrifying as a team. Yeah. But for me, what isn't getting them over the hump, I came into the season kind of saying this, and now I feel even more strongly. I think Devontae Freeman's one of the 5 best offensive players in the entire league, eliminating quarterback. I mean, he's so ridiculously talented, the way he can make people miss with his elusiveness and then also run you straight over if he feels like it. So for me, for him to have only 40 more carries than Tevin Coleman on the season is kind of stupid. I mean, it's the usage with Julio, we complain, but he did have 148 targets. That's not small. That's a lot of targets, but for why this Tevin Coleman's a solid player, and I don't by any means would I want them to ignore him, but how in the world you don't feature Devontae Freeman like crazy is baffling to me. Like, I truly believe Rod Smith's pretty good. Guess who's getting the ball in Dallas next year? A lot. Zeke.
Yeah.
Like, Rod Smith's a good player. He really is. I don't care. You've got Ezekiel Elliott. Tevin Coleman's better than Rod Smith, but Devontae Freeman's a top 5 back in this league, and they don't treat him like it. They treat him like a 60-40 split back like he was 2 or 3 years ago. That's not the player he is right now. You should let him win games for you because I think he can do it on his own.
I think the schedule actually benefits them next year too. They ran into a tough schedule this year, especially that stretch where they went 1-4 that you talked about, Miles. But they play. Still, their division is tough, and it's going to be a slugfest. And I can't wait to watch those games. But they also play the Bengals, the Cardinals, the Giants, the Ravens, the Bears, the Redskins. So they're going into a much better situation this year, not playing the Super Bowl schedule, and with people thinking they're down now, which we're talking about it, and other people are talking about it, and teams have to be feeling it a little bit that they had this big Super Bowl hangover. Not really. They went 10-6. They had a good season and could have gone to the Super Bowl. So, I think a lot of people are upplaying how bad they were because they're going to be good this year.
It's a third place schedule from far from a third place team.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know how much of this I want to get into now because I do want to save some of this for like when we talk about the state of the position coming up in the offseason. But I hope that you guys have some fire retardant gear because this is a little bit of a hot take. I think Matt Ryan's not that good. I really, truly feel that way. And there are, some numbers that are kind of on the fence that could really go either way. But when you look at it and break it down, for me, the bottom line is that for a guy who is among one of the top quarterbacks in the league, he just turns the ball over too often for me. I know last year, like it was 12 interceptions, but a 20 touchdown, 12 interception split, like that's not going to get it done. And I know that you're trying to be more of a run first team, but when you have some of the offensive weapons that you have, like you can't be 12 interceptions guy. You can't have double digit fumbles. You can't be among one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the league. And when you dive deeper into that, a lot of it is holding onto the ball and things, which, we'll get into eventually.
He's trying to play in a scheme that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And you have to give him some credit for that. But like historically, even before, this recent, drop off to Sarkisian or whatever, he's still kind of just been that guy, double digit turnovers all the time. The gap is just not far enough for me. And I know it's kind of a nitpick thing, but I don't know. I just feel like he turns the ball over way too much for my liking.
South, back at the beginning, you did say retardant, right?
Yes.
Retardant.
Yes.
Okay, because that's not what that felt like to me. That's not what that felt like.
Listen, I'm not giving you the whole breakdown because I do want to save some of it, but there are some staggering numbers.
Forever. Save it forever.
Yeah, I don't want to hear this again.
Save it forever.
Yeah, it's just I'm gonna throw this out there. Like up until like I know it's changed a lot in the last like 15 years because of how the NFL has changed, but up until like maybe 15 years ago, a 2-to-1 passing touchdown pass and interception ratio was like Hall of Fame worthy.
Yeah,
like
first ballot
Hall of Fame worthy, and like there was only like 6 guys ever that had a better than 2-to-1 ratio. I'm sure that number is up now in the era that we live in, but Matt Ryan is still above that 2-to-1 ratio. So
for his career.
For his career.
And that's driven by 2 seasons, honestly, because if you dig into it here, like we're talking a 21-16 split, 20-12 last year, 28-14, which is 2-to-1, but like it's always right on the fence of that,
conveniently leave out the 38-7. Well, 38-9. Like
that was the first thing I said was that it was driven by 2 seasons.
You're doing the same thing that I do when I'm trying to prove my point.
Everybody
I said it right out of the gates that it was driven by 2 seasons. So I didn't want to give the details of those 2 seasons, but it was driven by those 2. So
South, you're retardant.
All right, New Orleans Saints. We are like 40 minutes into this thing, and we're not even out of the playoff teams. New Orleans Saints, one of the most solid teams in the NFC this past season. What areas, if any, do you need to see them improve in?
They need to learn how to cover on the last play of the game. That's it. And I'm done talking about New Orleans.
That'd be a good start. And end.
I think I just need to make sure that, and I have no reason to believe this, but I need to make sure that the success of their rookies is sustainable. I need to know that, like, I don't see any reason Marshawn Lattimore's not that good. And I was all over Alvin Kamara pre-draft, but is Anzalone going to play that well all season? Is Marcus Williams, who missed the tackle but by every count had a great rookie season. Is he that good? You know, is Ryan Ramczyk going to play that well all the time? So it's just other than Drew Brees and Mark Ingram, is it sustainable? You know those two guys are, and I guess Michael Thomas to a lesser extent as well, is sustainable. But there's no reason to think that they're not going to be right back.
Yeah, they're with the Rams for me. Like, except there's not even a debate that we need to have. We already know what Drew Brees is,
Right?
And they're a young team. They're pretty far down on the age list, but that's only because of Drew Brees. Like, if Drew Brees wasn't playing for them, their age would drop by about 17 years. So their average age would be 14 years. That's how old they would be. So we don't have any concern at their skill positions. They got those covered. They have the rookie of the year on both sides of the ball, so we're confident in all their skill positions. And Drew Brees is the guy. He's the Larry Fitzgerald of quarterbacks. We're like, this might be the year he drops off, and then he just doesn't. And this year he kind of dropped off, but that's because they didn't need to use him in that way. But every time they needed to, he dominated.
His numbers dropped off. His play didn't.
Exactly. So I exactly, and I actually think that helped him. Put years onto his career that he didn't have to do much this year. He didn't have to have a 5,500 yard and 40 touchdown year. So.
It's a little bit of nitpicking for me, but like I think I'd like to see maybe a little bit more pass rush. That kind of was something that hurt them in the playoffs. A little bit of a lack of pass rush. I think this draft especially is ripe to fill that need. Yeah. And then, maybe another receiver or a tight end or something just to help them, because they had a really tough time on third down this year, converting third downs, which is weird for a team that was as productive and was able to run the ball the way that they were, to struggle on third down. But, they've kind of been missing that Jimmy Graham element at tight end for a while. And if you just imagine having something close to that element on this team, how dangerous they'd be. So, I mean, it's nitpicking, but if you're going to pick something, that's it for me. All right, the Minnesota Vikings, losers of the NFC Championship game last year. I think the biggest question right now for them, obviously, is the quarterback position. If they find the right guy to play quarterback for them, maybe even if they don't, they were really good this year. Do you expect them to kind of be right back in that position? NFC Championship, maybe Super Bowl potential again?
I'm going to catch some crap for this, but I personally feel like that was I'm going to say the peak of what they are or can be. And obviously the NFC Championship game is, a great peak, but I don't know that they can be much better than they were last year. Even with the injuries, I mean, Cook is going to be better than the combination of Murray and, McKinnon. But I don't know that they're going to get better quarterback play out of any of the three guys on their roster than they just got last year. More than likely, it'll be worse than that. And if they don't figure out what they're going to do with that situation, which I'm sure they'll figure something out, but let's just say all three of those guys feel burned here and they decide to go in a different direction, unless that different direction is Kirk Cousins, they can't be back where they were last year. So this team scares the bejesus out of me, because I don't think they can replicate what they just did.
You're not going to catch crap from me. I was Mr. Vikings.
Woo! I love it.
2017, I was Mr. Vikings. Preseason, I was the only one of us to pick them to win that division. And that was when I still thought Aaron Rodgers was going to stay healthy. So it wasn't just an injury thing for me. Of the 6 teams that made the playoffs in the NFC, I will be least surprised if the Vikings do not return. I think the way they went out is devastating. And now to be a little bit leaderless at the quarterback position, and we'll see what happens there, obviously. I don't think they're really in the Cousins sweepstakes. I think one of the 3 guys that was on the team will be back. Cook is going to improve them. For me, it's more of a mental thing, and I've been on record many times to say I believe in that kind of stuff big time. But to see how far away from beating Philadelphia you were after knowing that it took a miracle to beat New Orleans, and now Rodgers is back, and the Lions aren't going anywhere. And laugh at me if you will, but the Bears are going to be a lot better than they were this past season.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be surprised at all at like an 8-8, 9-7 kind of finish right on the outside. By no means do I think they're going 4-12. That defense is way too good. But I won't be surprised at all if they finish third behind Detroit and Green Bay.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I actually think that Green Bay is going to come back strong this year. And I like Detroit a lot. To me, it's going to be a dogfight for the Vikings. And I think that if they got back in, it's going to be as a wild card. So that's a much tougher route, as we all know. And as you said, it took a miracle to beat the Saints at home when you had that bye. So, you're going the wild card route with probably some inconsistency at the quarterback position. If Keenum isn't there, this year, that's going to be a tough road to hoe.
Yeah, I'm making 4 for 4, Rock. You're not taking any junk here. I was down on the Vikings all year, even going into the playoffs. So I think they're going to come back to earth. I'm probably not as far down as you are, Miles. I don't think 8-8. I think that's unlikely because I think their defense could win them 8 games. So all they have to do is beat a bad team to get better than that. But Rodgers coming back is a huge blow. I mean, I know it's only 2 games, but those are a big 2 games. And that could be the swing of between 13-3 and 11-5, and then just takes 1-2 more losses. So, yeah.
All right, that leaves us with the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles.
Say it again.
Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles.
Say it again.
It doesn't get any less true. And I've been trying to wake up every day and make sure it in fact happens. So they can really, I know that there's some hate out there from Vegas for the early favorite next year and whatever, but they really can't play that underdog card anymore because teams are going to be gunning for them. Not losing a whole lot on their roster, but there's plenty of turnover on the coaching staff. Do you feel like the Eagles should be back in this thing next year? Is the turnover on the coaching staff going to be too much? Is there something that we're maybe missing here in all of our post-Super Bowl hype?
No, it's kind of what I said about the Rams. There's no logical reason to think they won't be back, and in a huge way. I mean, why? Listen, they could go 5-11. You never know, but
yeah,
I mean, you're talking about a team that just won the Super Bowl. The best player they're likely to lose is Patrick Robinson, which, as well as he played, he's Patrick Robinson, and you're going to get back Carson Wentz, who was unquestionably the MVP of this league if he doesn't tear his ACL. So to say you don't think they'll be back, you're a hater. Will they? Time will tell. We'll see. But, I think the fact that of recent Super Bowl champions, the very, very small amount of roster turnover they should have is extremely helpful on a team that, from the inside, we all know they were built on camaraderie and the way they play together and love each other. To have that back, in addition to the fact that a couple of these guys can play okay, there's no logical reason to think they won't be a major contender again in 2018.
One, their best player, as you said, Miles, is wearing street clothes during the Super Bowl. Getting that back is unquestionably the biggest part of why I think that team is going to be right back next year. The only question I do have, and this kind of plays into the underdog card here, it's really easy to get yourself hyped up when everybody is doubting you, but it might not be as easy to play that role when you're on top. Well, do you come out? Does Malcolm Jenkins and Fletcher Cox come out as hungry, having already won it and proven the world wrong? You know what I mean?
If they don't, I hope they're traded away. I don't want players that are sasatisfied. That's a little bit of bravado, but
absolutely.
Do you think Tom Brady was cool after 2001? Clearly not.
Right.
Was Peyton fine to retire after 2006? Of course not. So I hear what you're saying. Like the underdog thing for me, I'll believe forever that it got them a little extra oomph to win it all, but they weren't underdogs all season. It wasn't until Carson went down that people, preseason fine, But once they started playing well, every week they were picked to kick the tail off of whoever they were playing until Carson got hurt. So you didn't go 13-3 because you were underdogs. I get the way it fueled the postseason run, and I won't underestimate that. But like to say that, Malcolm Jenkins is cool now. Well, he already had a ring. He obviously wasn't cool. Fletcher. I guess just personally, I don't think any of these guys are cool with what happened, and we're done here. And I don't say that as an Eagles fan. What players have we seen that are like, we're good. I'm coasting now. I think it's hard. It's hard to repeat, not because you're fine not doing it again, but because it's freaking hard to repeat. You're so, yeah. Well, he accidentally won it in the first place, but you're somebody's Super Bowl every week. That's why it's hard to repeat.
Yeah.
Well, no, but besides the fact that it's hard to repeat, I feel like even we've all played sports at some level here. And I understand that's not the NFL, but like it's hard to motivate yourself the way you do when you were the first place team in the conference and everybody thought you were going to lose in the first round. And you know what I mean? And then everybody thought you were going to lose in the second round. And everybody thought you were going to lose in the Super Bowl. Like that is hard to replicate. So getting back to the playoffs is not the issue for Philadelphia. Getting back to the playoffs and having the mental fortitude to continue it is where I question it. And it's not even that I question it. It's just I wonder if it's going to be as if the team is going to come out with the same drive and the same fight. And I'd like to hope so, but you don't know. You don't know if that really is what was fueling them the whole time.
No, you don't. And that's kind of what it goes back to what I said at the very beginning. They could absolutely fall apart next year. That could be a thing. I think, and maybe this is where you are. That's the only question. Like, we just don't know. But there's no reason to think that they're going to come out flat.
All right, guys, this is a perfect transition point for us because the Eagles really have two choices next year. They can either get hungry again and get after another Super Bowl, or they could be hungry and be on the outside looking in, wishing that they were there. And, our friends at Gorb, they tell us that we've got to make that decision basically every day. That's in life. There's only two choices: to get hungry or to be hungry. And getting hungry is about finding out what fuels you, what motivates you, what you want to go after, what you want to achieve, and just going after it full force 100%. Being hungry, on the inverse, is wishing constantly that you would have made that move, taken that first step, stepped out on the ledge there to be able to go after it and pursue it. Don't be the kind of person that is always wishing you did it. You could check them out at ghorbh.com. You'll notice if you're watching on YouTube, Rocco's got the stylish t-shirt on. Miles has the awesome hoodie on as well. It's comfortable, it's stylish, and it's a constant reminder that in life, you've got two choices. You can either get hungry or be hungry. Check them out, ghorbh.com today. All right, let's talk about the best of the rest, so to speak here. We're going to take a quick look, kind of a 10,000-foot view at the rest of the teams in the conference and just kind of decide whether or not we feel like any of these teams could do something this offseason to really make a push. The NFC East, obviously the champs came out of that division. It seems on paper like the Cowboys might be the closest roster-wise, with maybe the Redskins and Giants. Maybe they don't realize it yet, but it seems like they're heading toward a rebuild. Any of these teams making a legitimate push or can do something this offseason to do it?
Yeah, Dallas, man. I think Dallas is really good. I mean, they went 9-7 this past year, and they had a really tumultuous season, both with injuries. And I know, like, so did the Eagles, and that's been kind of the Twitter mantra of my people. But nonetheless, most teams can't overcome those kind of injuries. And then in addition to that, hands down, your best player, one of the 10 best players in football, got suspended for 6 games. And whether or not it was warranted, I'm not here to talk about, but they're hungry. They know they let one get away, going 9-7 despite all that crap, coming the year after getting the number 1 seed in the NFC. Dallas is absolutely the real deal, and there's no reason to think they won't be back in a big way in 2018.
Yeah, I think they're just a couple of pieces on the defensive line away from really being competitive and really being scary in the NFC as well. They're one of those teams that when they get hot, I mean, they play real well. They're really streaky. So, again, you said it. It's not necessarily whether we believe that Zeke did anything wrong, but at some point you got to kind of settle your tea kettle and just focus on football, and all that off the field stuff, the immaturity stuff has to go away. And you've got to prove that you're pretty much the best player, pure player at your position in the league. And just your team could jump on your back and you can make it happen. So hopefully for him, that's this season.
The only thing I'll add there is a little bit of what you said earlier, South, is that this is a good year to have problems on the defensive line. They can stack it up, and really that's the only pieces. Maybe add another receiver, but those are really the only pieces they need right now, so they can just start stacking those guys up.
We have very different views on the Dallas Cowboys. I'll tell you that much right now. I mean, I love Ezekiel Elliott. I love the running game. I think he's going to be back with a fire. I think Dez is old, and I don't know if he can still do it as a number 1. I think after Dez, they have literally nothing.
What do you mean by number 1?
South just had a stroke. He's out.
They need help along the defensive line. They need help in the secondary. I think that they can be back. I think they can take a step forward. I think it's very obvious right now that they are the number 2 team in that division.
That I'll agree with.
So, and I'm not saying that to pat you guys on the back. It's clearly obvious now that they're the number 2 team in that division. So you're already fighting for a wild card as it is, and I don't think it's just as simple as the D line. I just don't.
Where I'll respond is I think it's clear on paper they're the number 2 team in the division. But how often in the real world do we see number 2 teams in the division win the division?
Right.
It happens a lot. I mean,
number 4 team in the division won the Super Bowl last year.
Right, correct. The Eagles were last in 2016. So I think the thing with Dallas that I think is going to be hidden, and I'm sure it'll be talked about as the summer goes on, but the hidden great part about 2017 for the Cowboys is we found out what Dak was. And Dak haters are going to laugh about, well, he can't get it done without Zeke. Good. Now we know that for sure. Right. And now as a coaching staff, you're hoping Jason Garrett and company can say, hey, well, we got Zeke back. Let's run things the way we did in 2016 without the temptation of making it Dak's team. Make no mistake, this is Zeke's team. It is. It has to be. If you want to catch Philly and you want to go on a playoff run, it's Zeke's team.
Right.
And Dak is a great number 2, as he showed in 2016.
All right, let's talk about the NFC North. We kind of touched on this when we talked about the Vikings, but obviously Rodgers is expected to be back and ready to go right away. The Lions, we certainly, it doesn't look like they're going anywhere talent-wise. The Bears, we kind of hinted they might be better. So which of these teams do you feel like this offseason could make the jump into the playoffs?
Personally, I'll go ahead, Miles.
Well, what's funny is the Lions are definitely the better team, but the Packers have the best player of this era.
Right.
So it's like, if he's healthy, why in the world are they not going 12-4? Like, he's that good.
Minimum.
He's that good that they can barely address the glaring holes they have on their team across the lines at linebacker. And
we dropped out Miles again. So Rock, give us your
Aaron Rodgers and the Packers are this decade's version of the Colts from the 2000s. Like, as long as Peyton Manning is on the field, and like obviously Harrison and Wayne are better options than what they have now.
Anybody they've ever had.
But Nelson and Cobb and Adams are good pieces. So, but as long as Aaron Rodgers is on the field, it really does not matter what else is going on. The Packers probably would have won the division if Aaron Rodgers was there all year this year. And that's even with Minnesota going 13-3. So maybe not, but I'm throwing it out there. There's no reason to believe that the Packers will not be back as long as Aaron Rodgers is healthy. I like the Lions. I honestly don't know if they're good enough as it is to get past Minnesota or Green Bay. fully healthy, everything considered, and that's not a stab at Matthew Stafford. That's really a stab at the Lions' lack of ability to put a good product on the rest of the field. I know you guys like Amir. They have to do something at running back. Amir would be a good second back, but until they get a lead back that can take some pressure off Stafford, and make that offense two-dimensional, nothing is going to happen for that team.
It's funny you mentioned that because I'll say this right out of the gates: the Packers are in the playoffs; they're probably winning that division, but the Lions are going to be nipping at their heels all season long and are going to be a scary wildcard team this year, because I truly believe this is the offseason that they make a big splash in the draft. And we're going to get into this further over the next couple weeks, but I think they're going to do something in the draft that is going to surprise people, and it's going to kind of make them a lot sexier on paper. Hopefully, I would assume that it's going to work out for them. Obviously on the field as well. But I think this is the year they finally say, look, we got a highly paid quarterback. Let's do something special around him.
They're going to trade up for Barkley, South.
We'll get to it. All right, let's talk about the NFC South here. Just about every team, really kind of except for the Bucs last year, but talent-wise, they could also make a case, as being a playoff talent team. So how do we see this playing out? Who's kind of the team that's on the outside looking in this year?
I don't think there's anything the Bucs can do this offseason to be one of the top three teams in that division. I think even looking at all the talent that they have, they're still not good enough to beat any of the other three teams. And that's just the way. I just think that, unfortunately, right now, that's the way it goes. Maybe once Breeze retires, or if the Panthers don't address their issues, they're definitely not better than the Falcons. And the other two teams in the division right now seem head and shoulders above them.
Are you using a little bit of recency bias there, though? I mean,
yes.
Listen, I tend to agree with you that I think, pending what happens this offseason, they're still fourth in the division to me. But the fact is, everybody, not just the four of us, people were all over the Bucs last year. They were absolutely one of the most bet on teams in Vegas because of their odds, because people believed in them. Well, what are they going to lose that we don't believe in them now? I mean, I know we just saw a season of average play out of Jameis Winston, but if you believed in Jameis to Mike Evans before, why not anymore?
Okay, because we know that Jameis to Mike Evans is okay, but it's not okay enough to win you that division or even be competitive with the other three teams. The Deshaun Jackson project, I guess, could come back, but it probably won't. Doug Martin is now out the door. Your offensive line has holes on it as it is. Your defense underperforms. Jameis is still making stupid decisions. So until Jameis stops making stupid decisions, you address the running back position with something other than Charles Sims, and then address the rest of the whole Quiz Rogers, and then address the rest of the positions on your team. Why? Yeah, people were betting on them because they looked like an up-and-coming team, and then they showed us that they weren't. So now, until they show us that they're an up-and-coming team again, no one's betting on the Bucs.
Yeah, I think that's my biggest issue with the Bucs. You just kind of hit it, is that for all accounts coming out in the draft, people were calling Jameis Winston the smartest football mind to come out since Peyton Manning. And I'm not going to sit here and doubt that, but
I doubt it.
Well, I mean, as far as chalkboard and knowing what should happen in theory, but there's few guys that get touted as football smart that make the sheer number of poor decisions that Jameis Winston makes. It's crazy to me that a guy can be that smart on the chalkboard and then under pressure and under fire, and I don't even mean pass rush pressure, I just mean when the game's on the line, makes those horrible decisions.
Yeah. So what you're telling me is Jameis Winston has an outsourcing problem. He knows what to do in his head, but he can't make his body do it.
He can't send it out to his weird and awkward limbs.
I was already not a big fan, but then when he did that eating dubs thing, man, I was so not a fan of that.
You and all the other Buccaneer players.
And everybody in the whole freaking world.
Right.
I'll actually back up. I agree with you on this one, Rock, and I'll back you up on a point you didn't really mention, that we, as well as a lot of the other world, and I'm the biggest faulter here, we thought Doug Martin was going to be back. We thought he was going to be a good running back, and he just wasn't really. So that was part of the problem, and they haven't addressed that. And I'm not sure they have enough firepower to really fix it right now with all the other needs they have.
I actually think Jameis Winston is going to take a step forward this year.
He has to.
But I think it's actually going to be the step that we expected last year. I think that we're going to wonder, next off season, wow, what happened with Jameis in 2017? I think it's just going to kind of be like a weird one-off kind of thing. I really do. Now, is that enough for the Bucs to be a playoff team this year? Probably not. I mean, they need to do quite a bit of work this offseason. But I do think Jameis still does have it in him. And I, for one, am going to be a very happy person that a lot of people have kind of, pushed him back a little bit this offseason based on how he played last year when it comes to fantasy football time. Because I think that he could be a guy who surprises a lot of people. But I really do expect him to take that next step that we anticipated last offseason this year. There's just too much raw talent there. So I do think it's going to happen. Mike Evans is still really good, and I do think they're going to do enough around him to improve his situation. So
I think ultimately what it might boil down to is less about however you feel about the Bucs and more about, as many people believed in them last offseason, is the same amount of people that did not at all believe in the Saints.
Right.
So it's kind of like, as much as we may feel, because I do feel they'll bounce back, I still feel like they're the fourth best team in that division.
Yeah. All right, let's quickly talk about the NFC West. The Rams took a huge leap this past year. I think a lot of people are feeling like the 49ers could be lined up to do something similar this year. Can it happen? We can discuss that here. But another question, too, to discuss, is the window closed or closing on the Seahawks at this point?
It's tough to say. I love Seattle. I've loved them since this. I like guys that play with that attitude of Richard Sherman and Earl Thomas and that swag, if you will. But
I won't.
You won't? All right. I usually wouldn't either, but I liked it. So,
okay.
I think ultimately age has really caught up to them, and they haven't even done an adequate job of filling it in with their draft classes. It hasn't been – they haven't even had solid draft classes. So, I mean, I like what they added in Griffin last year at corner. I think he's going to fill in adequately for Richard Sherman. But for me, it's still – how much can you expect Russell Wilson to do? And it's – I mean, there's very few players who can do more than he can.
Yeah.
But, I mean, come on. The guy – well, you know what? I won't pretend I know. But I know it was like week 15 or 16 where they had one touchdown that wasn't thrown or run in by him. And I don't know if the season ended that way or not. I know he was your leading passer. I know he was your leading rusher. I know he had the passing touchdowns. I know he had the most rushing touchdowns. I know you went about 5-11 if he wasn't on your team.
Worse.
Yeah.
Worse.
Get the guy a little bit of help, man. It's insane to me that they can't even get like solid players outside of Doug Baldwin on this guy's team. It's crazy.
I mean, even Jimmy Graham was a huge disappointment for them. And what I wrote down here is that the window is closing for sure unless they absolutely go out and make this team what it was a couple of years ago by getting a running game for Russell to be able to rely on. Like, this team was at its absolute best when it was Russell Wilson running the show and Marshawn Lynch running the ball. Like, and honestly, like, you don't have to go out and get a Marshawn Lynch type back, but you have to get something.
Not Cheeseburger Eddie.
Not Cheeseburger Eddie. Not Chris Carson. Not
Thomas Rawls.
Thomas Rawls,
CJ
not
Procise.
CJ Pro. Hey, I like CJ Procise. Not McKissick. Not
Right.
like
They had 19 guys and they all were
we're throwing names out at you that most people haven't even heard of. Okay, until they suited up that week for the Seahawks. Like, I honestly feel awful for Russell Wilson. Like, I'm glad he got his Super Bowl early. That's cool for him because he's going to have that forever. Yeah. And they've done nothing since that Super Bowl to help him at all because they just let the team he had that year get older the next year, and then they lost. And then they let those guys walk, and then the rest of the crew got older. They've done nothing to replace any of those talented players from that first Super Bowl team.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, the window for them, the only reason it's not closed is because Russ's fingers are in there, just kind of like barely keeping it
open.
Yeah, other than that, I mean, look, even their defense took a big drop this past year, which was kind of like their selling point for most of this run. So, I think obviously we talked about the Rams, but I think the 49ers are going to be really competitive this year. I'm not willing to say they're going to be like this year's version of the Rams where they make that big jump, but I think they're going to be in the fight for a wild card spot right down till the end. I'm not sure they get it, but they're going to be that competitive just because I think they have the right coaches in place. They have the right guys in certain spots to just be competitive. They really have to knock it out of the park this offseason with some of the moves they make and some of the pieces they bring in. But I think they're going to be competitive all the way through.
There's nothing you could possibly say to convince me the 49ers aren't going 16-0.
Nothing.
Nothing.
I'm going to go. I don't know if you're joking or not, Deal. Like, obviously you're joking because they're not going to go 16-0. I'm going to go out right now and say that I think that the 49ers are going to be in the NFC Championship game.
Why? I'm so irritated.
Wait a second.
I
took so much crap.
I'm sorry. No. I can't again with what's being said. Why?
Okay.
Why? So they're a 2-14 team, and Jimmy Garoppolo, and now they're one of the 4 best teams in the entire league.
Because his cousin Sal from Long Island is their quarterback now.
Cousin Sal is the quarterback. No, listen, they have
the quarterback coach combo. They
have the quarterback coach combo. They're going to go into this offseason knowing what their needs are. They have
that's good.
Okay, listen, and honestly,
none of the other 31 teams know what they need.
Listen. Honestly, I understand that they were not that great in terms of win-loss. Their margin of victory in their losses last year was shockingly low. They got a quarterback and learned how to turn those 7-point losses into 3-point wins. Or, I don't know, when they played the Jaguars, the top defense in the NFL, and beat them by like 30 points. This is a team that is growing. They have the quarterback in place. Kyle Shanahan knows exactly what he wants and what he needs. They're going to go out this offseason. They're going to address that, and they're going to win the NFC West, and they will play for the NFC Championship game.
You further convinced me. 16-0.
I think I'm calling it now, and this way, next year, I look like a genius.
Deal, write it down.
I'll write that sucker down.
Write it down.
Listen, I need about a week off.
You don't need a week off.
Let's just get it next week.
You said the Jets were winning the East, and I could say the Niners are winning the West. That's a thing.
I didn't put the Jets in the championship game. Like, that's a very significant, ordeal. So
Miles is fired up and off. He's off. We can't even hear him. He's just fired up. Just screaming over there, silently screaming.
All right, listen, we need to simmer on this thing for like a week here. So let me remind you, we've got a ton of stuff going on this offseason. The mock drafts have already started. Every Thursday, we're going to have a brand new mock draft on the site for you. Every week in March, we're going to have a NFL draft positional breakdown hitting the site for you. Those things are only going to be available at footballgoons.com. You can check them out there. If you follow us on social media at facebook.com/footballgoons or at footballgoons on the Twitter, we'll tweet the links to those as well. Listen, This is free content. And despite what hot take Rocco just spit out to you tonight, I promise you that these are well-researched pieces, free content. You're not going to get a ton of banner ads that you have to click through. You're not going to get a teaser and ask you to become an insider or, subscribe or anything like that. You're getting them absolutely for free in a format that is fun to read, easy to read. You could scroll right through it, get a lot of good content all through there. You cannot lose with this. Check it out all off season long, footballgoons.com. We're not taking an off season. There is no off season for the Football Goons. All right. So keep in touch with us on social media. We love to hear from you guys. We'll give you a shout out during the show if you submit good questions, comments. If somebody basically has really good insults this week for Rocco, you're going to get on the show next week. So
I do. I have insults for Rocco right now, but you can't hear them because my microphone's been struggling.
All right. Well, let's save them up because episode 100 is next week. We got something special planned for you. We're going to present that to you guys throughout the week here on social media. So make sure you're checking in there to hear what we're going to do. It's going to be interactive and it's going to be a lot of fun. Next week, 9 o'clock right here live and then in podcast form. We'll catch you guys next time.